On the set of Disney's 1961 classic The Parent Trap, 14-year-old Hayley Mills was the most beloved child star in the world. But to her on-screen father, Brian Keith, she was a nuisance he barely tolerated. While audiences saw a heartwarming family comedy, a quiet and bitter war was unfolding behind the cameras. Mills would later confess she utterly hated him, and the shocking reason why created a toxic environment that would follow her for decades, a story of clashing worlds, silent torment, and the dark side of a Disney dream. To understand the story of what happened on the set of The Parent Trap, you first have to understand the two very different worlds that were about to collide. One was a world of English country gardens, famous parents, and the gentle guidance of Walt Disney himself. The other was a world of broken homes, military discipline, and the brutal reality of war. These two worlds were personified by a young girl named Hayley Mills and a man named Brian Keith. Hayley Catherine Rose Vivian Mills was quite literally born into the British acting elite on April 18, 1946. Her father was the legendary Sir John Mills, a pillar of British cinema, and her mother was Mary Hayley Bell, a successful writer and playwright. Her older sister Juliet was also an actress. Hayley's childhood wasn't spent in the hustle of London, but on a sprawling 400-acre dairy farm in the quiet countryside of Sussex. It was a sheltered and peaceful upbringing, surrounded by a loving family that was at the very center of the theatrical world. Her entry into that world seemed almost accidental. At just 12 years old, she was discovered by director J. Lee Thompson while he was visiting her father to discuss a new film, Tiger Bay. The lead role was written for a boy, but Thompson saw something special in the young Hayley as she played in the garden. He was so impressed that he changed the part for her, casting her without even a screen test. Her performance in the 1959 crime drama was a sensation. She won a British Academy Award for Most Promising Newcomer, and her natural talent was obvious to everyone. After the film, Hayley went back to her life as a student at a private boarding school, but her performance had already started a ripple effect across the Atlantic. The story goes that Walt Disney's wife, Lillian, saw Tiger Bay while taking shelter from the rain in London. She was so insistent that her husband see this remarkable young actress that Walt flew to London himself. He met Hayley and her parents at the fancy Dorchester Hotel. At the time, Disney was struggling to cast the lead for his next big film, Pollyanna, having auditioned hundreds of girls without success. After meeting Hayley, he knew he had found his star. He signed her to a 5-year, 6-picture contract, again without a single screen test. Almost overnight, Hayley Mills became a global superstar. Her role in 1960's Pollyanna earned her a special Juvenile Academy Award, the last one ever given. She was now the crown jewel of the Disney studio. For Hayley, the studio was a wonderful and safe place to work. She described it as having a warm, family feeling. She saw Walt Disney as a kind and generous man, an exemplary figure who would never dream of exploiting his young actors. He was more than a boss. He was a protective figure in her life. In her own words, he became a surrogate father. She was Disney's princess, carefully guided and shielded from the darker side of Hollywood, living inside a bubble of wholesome perfection. But that bubble was about to be pierced by a man who had seen the worst the world had to offer. While Hayley Mills was growing up in a world of privilege and protection, Brian Keith's early life was marked by instability and tragedy. He too was born into a show business family on November 14, 1921, in Bayonne, New Jersey. His father, Robert Keith, was a working actor, and his mother, Helena Shipman, was a stage actress. But unlike the Mills family, their life was not one of stability. His parents divorced when he was very young, and he made his first film appearance at just 2 years old. For a brief time, his stepmother was a Broadway actress named Peg Entwistle. Their marriage to his father ended, and a few years later, in 1932, she tragically took her own life by jumping from the H of the famous Hollywood sign. Brian's life was far from the glamorous Hollywood dream, but the experience that would truly define him came when he was just 19 years old. In the summer of 1941, months before the United States would even enter World War II, Brian Keith walked into a recruitment office and joined the United States Marine Corps. He didn't need a sales pitch or any convincing. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, he was sent to Paris Island for boot camp. He served as a radio man and tail gunner in a Douglas SBD Dauntless dive bomber, a dangerous job in the rear cockpit of a 2-man plane. He saw extensive combat in the South Pacific, flying dangerous bombing missions against the Japanese stronghold of Rabaul. He flew through a perilous stretch of sky that the Marines grimly called the Valley of Death. For his service and bravery, he was awarded the Air Medal, a decoration for heroic achievement in flight. When he returned from the war, he carried those experiences with him. He took up the family trade of acting, but he wasn't playing charming princes or sweet-natured fathers. He built a career playing tough guys, gruff cowboys, and hard-nosed villains in dozens of westerns and crime dramas. He was known for being refreshingly blunt, a man who wasn't afraid to speak his mind, even to powerful studio executives. His personality was not shaped on a soundstage. It was forged in the cockpit of a warplane. He was direct, unsentimental, and had little patience for nonsense. He was a Marine, through and through. And he was about to walk onto the perfectly polished set of a Walt Disney production, right into the path of its most precious star. The set of 1961's The Parent Trap was supposed to be a place of Disney magic. The film was a huge production, a romantic comedy that hinged entirely on the charm of its young star. But for that magic to work, it required an incredible amount of technical precision and emotional pressure, all of which landed squarely on the shoulders of a 14-year-old girl. It was an environment that demanded patience and perfection. Into this delicate world walked Brian Keith, a man whose entire professional style was the exact opposite of what was needed. The collision was immediate, and for Hayley Mills, it was devastating. Hayley Mills wasn't just another actor in The Parent Trap, she was the entire movie. The whole story depended on the audience believing that she was two different people, identical twins named Susan and Sharon. At just 14, she had to carry the film, and the way it was made put her under a microscope. The production was a technical marvel for its time. It was one of the first movies to make extensive use of a technology called the sodium vapor process, an early version of a green screen, as well as a complex split-screen effect to put two versions of Hayley in the same shot. This wasn't simple movie magic, it was a painstaking process that required absolute perfection. Scenes had to be filmed multiple times. Hayley would first play one twin, acting opposite a body double named Susan Henning, a young actress who would never even get credit in the film. Then Hayley would change her clothes, her hair, and her entire character, and film the same scene again, this time playing the other twin. The crew had to be incredibly precise. They even put footprints on the floor to show the actors exactly where to stand. If someone was off their mark by even an inch, the illusion would be ruined, and they would seem to disappear from the screen. In addition to all this technical pressure, Hayley also had to master two distinct American accents, one for Susan from California and another for Sharon from Boston. She later admitted that it was incredibly confusing, especially in scenes where one twin was pretending to be the other. Sometimes she wasn't even sure which accent she was supposed to be using. All of this meant that a 14-year-old girl was working under intense pressure, in a role that would have challenged even a seasoned adult actor. She needed support, patience, and understanding from her co-stars. From one of them, she would get none. Brian Keith operated on a film set with the same no-nonsense efficiency he learned in the Marines. He saw acting as a job to be done, and he had little time for the delicate process that others required. His co-star from the later TV show Family Affair, Kathy Garver, described his method perfectly. She said that while other actors would study their scripts for hours, Keith would walk on set, take a quick look at the scene, and simply say, "Let's go." He preferred improvisation and spontaneity over endless rehearsal. This approach was a direct clash with the needs of the Parent Trap production. The film's technical demands meant that scenes had to be done the same way, time after time, to make the special effects work. There was no room for improvisation. Hayley needed to repeat her performance exactly, and that often meant doing multiple takes to get it right. For a man like Keith, this was a frustrating waste of time. He was also known for being very direct about his feelings. Kathy Garver noted that he was very outspoken about those that he did not like. He didn't hide his impatience or his opinions. His on-screen persona as a gruff, macho, and hard-nosed man was not just an act, it was a reflection of his real personality. He approached his work with a get-it-done attitude that left no room for what he might have seen as childish sensitivity or the slow, repetitive nature of filming complex special effects. His professional style was the worst possible match for the delicate, high-pressure environment surrounding his young co-star. Every time she needed another take, every time she had to reset for a technical shot, it grated against his desire to move on, and he wasn't the kind of man to keep his frustrations to himself. The sunny, happy image of The Parent Trap hides a much darker story. For audiences, Brian Keith was the charming, rugged father any kid would love to have. But for Hayley Mills, He was a source of constant stress and anxiety. The reason she came to hate him wasn't because of one big fight or a single cruel act. It was something worse. It was a quiet, grinding war of nerves, a daily experience of being made to feel small, unwelcome, and worthless by a powerful man who seemed to have no time for a child's feelings. Years after the film wrapped, whispers began to emerge from the set, painting a picture of a silent war between the two stars. There were stories that Keith had a cruel nickname for Haley, calling her the Golden Goose, a biting remark about her status as Disney's favorite star. People said he would roll his eyes when she asked for clarification on a line and would interrupt her during table reads. There were even rumors that he openly mocked her British accent in front of the crew, calling her mannerisms highfalutin nonsense. The most dramatic story, a legend that was never confirmed but was whispered about for years, involved a moment of explosive anger. According to this rumor, Keith became so furious when Haley flubbed a line during a high-pressure scene that he slammed a chair to the floor, stormed off the set, and later blamed her for ruining the rhythm of the shoot. But the real story was perhaps more damaging than any single outburst. The true wound came from the constant daily feeling of being dismissed. Haley Mills was a shy person by nature, and she was already struggling with the immense pressure of her fame and the perfect image Disney had created for her. She was full of self-doubt, a young girl trying to navigate an adult world. Keith's gruffness and impatience were like pouring salt on an open wound. The small insults, the dismissive gestures, the feeling of being an inconvenience. The heart of the problem was how Brian Keith made Haley Mills feel. Years later, she would say it in the simplest, most powerful way. He was difficult, she said. He made it very clear I wasn't welcome in his space. In a letter that was reportedly discovered long after her autobiography was published, she wrote that he was the one person she could not forgive. Not for what he did, but for how small he made me feel. This was the real reason for her feelings. At the height of her stardom, when she was the most famous child actor in the world, he made her question her own worth. It's a feeling that many young people experience when faced with an intimidating adult, but for Haley, it was happening in the bright glare of Hollywood lights. What makes the story so complicated is that Keith was not a monster to everyone. His other co-stars saw a different side of him. Maureen O'Hara, who played Haley's mother in the film, was a famously fiery and tough actress in her own right. She respected Keith's rugged nature and worked with him on 3 different movies, even handpicking him to star opposite her in The Deadly Companions. She saw him as a professional peer. Kathy Garver, who played his niece on Family Affair, called him a wonderful man who was both macho and incredibly warm and sensitive. So what was different with Haley? It was a matter of power and perspective. Keith was a 39-year-old combat veteran who was used to working with other adults. Haley was a 14-year-old girl who was used to the protective, fatherly environment of the Disney studio. Keith didn't seem to adjust his behavior for his young co-star. He treated a vulnerable teenager the same way he would treat any other actor on a tough Western set. He failed to see that his professional bluntness could be deeply wounding to a child. What Maureen O'Hara saw as rugged professionalism, Haley Mills experienced as a personal attack. He didn't offer guidance or mentorship. Instead, he represented everything that scared her about the adult world of Hollywood, the arrogance, the impatience, and the cold dismissal of a young person's feelings. That was the reason she hated him. He was the man who made her feel like she didn't belong. The difficult experience on the set of The Parent Trap didn't just end when the cameras stopped rolling. It left a lasting mark on both Haley Mills and Brian Keith, sending their careers in surprisingly opposite directions. For Haley, it fueled a desire to break free from the very image that had made her a star. For Brian, it was followed by a role that would redefine him in the public eye, showing a side of him that Haley never got to see. Their time together was a brief intersection, but its echoes would be felt for years to come. As soon as her contract with Disney was over, Haley Mills made a conscious effort to shed her wholesome girl-next-door image. The pressure to be forever young, which she felt so intensely on the set with Keith, pushed her to seek out more challenging and adult roles. Even during her Disney years, she had felt frustrated by the studio's tight control. They had vetoed her chances to appear in more serious films like Lolita and Exodus, believing the roles were too adult for her image. In 1966, she took a bold step by appearing in the British film The Family Way. The role was a dramatic departure from her Disney work and included a nude scene that shocked audiences who still saw her as the innocent girl from Pollyanna. This move can be seen as a direct reaction to her experiences. The intimidating adult world of filmmaking that Brian Keith represented was something she no longer wanted to run from. Instead, she wanted to prove that she belonged in it, that she was a serious actress who could not be dismissed or made to feel small. Her time on The Parent Trap may have been painful, but it also solidified her resolve to grow up and take control of her own career, leaving the Disney princess behind for good. Just a few years after The Parent Trap, Brian Keith landed a role that would make him a household name and cement a public image that was the complete opposite of what Hayley Mills had experienced. In 1966, he was cast as Uncle Bill Davis in the hit sitcom Family Affair. In the show, he played a swinging bachelor whose life is turned upside down when he becomes the reluctant guardian to his 3 orphaned nieces and nephew. The character of Uncle Bill blended Keith's signature gruffness with a deep, underlying tenderness. He was a tough guy with a heart of gold, and audiences fell in love with him. The role earned him 3 Emmy nominations and made him one of America's favorite TV dads. His co-stars on that show remembered him as a loving and supportive presence, especially with the child actors, a stark contrast to the stories from the Parent Trap set. He had found a way to channel his macho persona into something warm and fatherly. This created a strange irony. The man who made a child star feel unwelcome and small became beloved for playing a caring father figure. It showed that Brian Keith was a far more complex man than the one-dimensional figure Hayley Mills remembered. He was capable of both gruff intimidation and profound warmth. His life was one of contrasts, marked by professional success but also by deep personal tragedy. In his later years, he battled emphysema and lung cancer. In 1997, just weeks after his own daughter tragically took her own life, a heartbroken Brian Keith ended his own life at the age of 75. He was a complicated man, a decorated Marine, a gruff cowboy, and a beloved TV uncle, whose full story was known by very few. On the screen, they created a timeless piece of movie magic, the perfect family in a story loved by millions. Behind the scenes, that magic couldn't hide the real-life collision between a battle-hardened Marine from a world of harsh realities and a sheltered English rose from the carefully protected kingdom of Disney. The reason for the deep resentment wasn't a single fight or a dramatic outburst, but a quiet, constant struggle of nerves that left a lasting mark. It's a powerful reminder that in Hollywood, the happiest stories often hide the most complicated and human truths.